Hi, welcome back for Game Changer Chat. I'm your host, Zakiya Mabry, and we're continuing our conversation about mental health awareness. Support the mental health conversation for yourself, your employees, and people in your family that you love. Today, we have with us Dr. Donna, I'm so sorry, Wilton. Please welcome her to the show.
Yes, hello. Good evening. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you for being with us. How are you this evening?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're most welcome. If everyone who's watching this, can you please put down in the comments where geographically you're located? Yes, please go ahead and just type where you're located. That will be most helpful for us. We really appreciate it. And don't forget to hit the like button. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Walton, for those of us who are watching, who do not know about you or your background, please share with us what makes you an expert in the disability inclusion conversation.
Okay, excellent question. I'll first begin with the fact that I'm born and raised in Washington D.C. That makes me a wonderful Washingtonian. I had a life-changing experience in my early adulthood. I was diagnosed with osteogenic sarcoma, which led to having an amputation of my left leg. And that put me on a whole trajectory of majoring in education and counseling. I not only wanted to know more about myself, but I wanted to know now how could I help others who are going through the same experience that I have. And so through that whole journey, I taught school, I've taught special education. I have basically been I am a cognitive behavioral therapist working on the area of disability policy and working with individuals, ensuring that persons with disabilities are reasonably accommodated in the workplace and that they have excellent mental health and have mental health strategies to help them cope and deal with their lives.
That is wonderful. So, working in this line of work, can you please tell us why is it important that individuals feel empowered, especially those with mental health and disabilities? How do we, A, why is it important that they feel empowered, and how do they empower individuals with disabilities?
Well, okay, so first of all, self-efficacy and empowerment is a is a tool that everyone needs to have, not just because a person with a disability or a person with mental illness needs to have that. That is just a tool that we all need to have. So it is important for our self-development and how we sort of navigate the world. And, in terms of how you build that, you know, there are various ways by which you empower individuals. I can tell you that one of the major strategies, I would say, is teaching individuals how to do self-care and how to self-advocate. That is one of the, I guess, two of the major aspects of empowerment. If you are able to advocate for yourself, then you're able and take care of yourself, then you're able to pretty much have this confidence, right? To basically take up for yourself and to be able to strategize and navigate the world on your own terms because you are definitely having your self-confidence and taking care of yourself, and that's just really important.
Very important. Um, so, do you feel that there's a divide in the disabled community as far as those who have mental health conditions and those who have physical disabilities?
That's a very interesting question as well. There's a hierarchy in terms of disability.
Mhm.
I would say so. It's the way that, first of all individuals people with disabilities are all they're not monolithic, so therefore they don't operate the same. And so the way by which they navigate the world is going to be, you know it may not be like, okay, I'll give you an example. So I'm an amputee.
Mhm.
I'm a above the knee amputee. There are bilateral amputees. That means persons who have lost two legs. There are persons who have lost arms. Right. Every We do not all operate the same. We do
Right.
not behave the same. We do not
Mhm.
wear our prosthetics the same. We've all had different learning experiences to get on the journey that we have. Individuals of mental illness, so in terms of their behavioral issues, they're not going to navigate the world the same. They're not going to learn the same way. So
Mhm.
sometimes it is unfortunate that there is sometimes I am better than you, or and so they're excluded as a matter of fact because they don't understand it, or they may have different ways of navigating the world because they're navigating their own lived experience. They're going to navigate that totally different from a person with a physical disability, of what I would like to say a visible disability versus an invisible disability.
Mhm.
Because as you know, society reacts to those two differently, and there is so much stigma around mental illness that one really, that particular disability is not going to always show up the same way in anyone. Everyone who has a disability is not the same. Everyone has a mental illness is not the same. So yes, there is a somewhat of a difference by the way people with disabilities are treated based on their type of disability. It's unfortunate, but it's true.
I totally agree. And I just want to highlight some points that you mentioned, the lived experience of the individual that makes the difference. And the terms that I feel comfortable using as well, a visible and non-visible, non-apparent disabilities. Those are so key. And thank you for bringing that to light for the people who are watching this. Thank you so much. Um, have you noticed in your line of work, for those who don't know, that you've worked in EO, diversity, equality, and inclusion for most of your career, and also education? Have you noticed any
Mhm.
racial disparities or discrimination due to your disability? If so, can you please explain?
Oh yeah, well, here we go with that. I'm gonna give you an example of what's called a triple jeopardy syndrome, okay, or a triple threat, if you will. When an
Yes.
individual has a disability, okay, I'll use myself as a classic example, being black, female, and disabled, right? Though,
Yes.
those are two marginalized or three marginalized identities. And yes, there
Mm-hmm.
is discrimination that exists on each of those identities. And the thing that makes it so very unfortunate and it's so insidious is that sometimes you don't know which of those identities are working against you, which one is being
Right.
actually discriminated on. And so I can give you an example. For example, if I go to an interview, well, I've gone to interviews, right? And I know that I am absolutely qualified for that position. It's just, I always think, is there's no one better for this position than I am, right? So I am
Mm-hmm.
very confident in that. When I leave that interview and I learned that I did not get that job, now what do you think that I am automatically think? I think, well, was it because I was black? Was it because I was disabled, right? Or was
Yes.
it because I was,
Yes.
you never know
Right.
which of those identities
Mm-hmm.
are really working against you. What we're trying to do now is to look at the intersection of these identities and have
Woo.
in society, address those, right? Know that there is an overlap, and that just because I'm black doesn't negate the fact that I have a disability. They're all integrated, right, and included in the way that I live my life experience. And I can't compartmentalize who I am on any day. When I show up as a black woman, but I don't. I'm also a black woman who happens, right, to live with a disability, and all of them are just as important. They're equal.
Dr. Walton, you are uh, so amazing. Can you just talk a little more about intersectionality for those who are not familiar with it?
Yeah. Well, see, intersectionality was first brought up by Miss Crenshaw, and her name just escapes me. I don't know why her name escapes me right now,
Mm-hmm.
but so it looks at. She talked about Kimberly Crenshaw. Thank you,
Mm-hmm.
Kimberly Crenshaw. an attorney, she came up with this. She looked at the fact that we black people have these identities, and that they intersected, and that racism, classism, all of these, you could not show up in a space and not have these other issues not being addressed. So when I walk into a room, the fact that I'm a black woman doesn't, and then I'm discriminated against. You have to also now look at the fact that that intersects with who I am, that particular classism or racism, intersects with who I am. In fact, it even compounds the fact that I'm a black woman, because now I'm these other identities, or these other isms, if you will, compound, you know, my race. So on top of my race, there's these other marginalized issues that intersect with who I am in my lived experience. And further and further, and places me further outside the margin, if you will, further marginalized.
Absolutely. Let's go dig a little deeper and discuss some of the imaginary stereotypes and stigmas that society, the entertainment industry, even the media have as far as the perception of individuals with disabilities. And are there any suggestions on how we, people like you and I with disabilities, how we can change the perceptions? I have um, several hidden disabilities, and now I have a physical disability. But what can we do to change the perception of how these entities view us?
Well, that's a very large question, because first we have to think about the stereotypes that have been perpetuated over centuries, if you will, right, about persons with disabilities. If you really think about, how disability was once perceived, we were in circus, people with disabilities were in circus. They were just absolutely looked as if they were freaks, if you will. They came with many negative, sort of perceptions. And so then you carry that along in terms of looking at how we've moved from some of those, perceptions and stereotypes. What we can do is we debunk those myths and stereotypes by, first of all, showing up unapologetically as who we are. And I think it's really important to always self-identify. I think it's really important for individuals with disabilities. I mean, not everyone does that, but I think that if we show up to show, I don't fit that stereotype. I am sort of shifting the paradigm of what disability looks like. And that, I was going to talk more about that, about my organization. I created this organization called the Divas with Disabilities Project to do just that, to show that the word diva or a diva could exist or coexist with a person with a disability. That, because I have a disability does not make me a less diva, doesn't make me less empowered, doesn't make me less beautiful. And so what we can do is really, like I said, to show up in our own space and identify and show society what disability does look like. It doesn't look like what they think it looks like. And that it's never going to look the same. Everyone is going to operate differently. Now, I'll talk about, you talked about I'll talk about mass media in terms of what Hollywood, if you will. That's one of my initiatives with the Divas with Disabilities Project. And that is to show that it's only like 2% of people with disabilities that play roles in Hollywood, right? So we are trying to change that by showing that there are qualified individuals, women with disabilities, who can play these roles. You don't have to go out and find an amputee or have someone they're an amputee, when there are many amputees sitting right out here, qualified to play the role. So that's one of the things. It's like we really have to place ourselves in those spaces, and it's not always easy, but we always have to show up. And I always say, if we're not only just being in the boardroom, but just like, or being at the table, but actually having a voice at the table.
Yes,
It's one thing to
yes.
just go in the room. You just say, "Well, I was there." Well, what we have to also. It's like being invited to the party but then you're not
Mm-hmm.
asked to dance, right? So it's like
Yes.
we have we have to always we have to always work just triply hard, right? We have to work
Mm-hmm.
as hard as we can. And it is always, and I don't like to use the word struggle, but it's always a challenge because every
Mm-hmm.
day that I walk my door, you're always trying to debunk a theory, right? To debunk that, why can't I be here? And that's why I get so frustrated when places are not accessible to allow individuals with wheelchair users to have access to places. To if I go into a room or into a space and someone's like didn't think the fact that there's a lot of stairs or not
Mm-hmm.
making places accessible. Thinking
Right.
about that ahead of time. So what
Mm-hmm.
you do is we and I think persons with disabilities have just as much responsibility as the outer world to make sure
Mm-hmm.
that we show up and know that we're here. But that's good. That's a challenge as well, because many times people with disabilities or some individuals with disabilities do not go out to spaces. Why? Because they're not welcomed. And you
Right.
just the you just get tired of being assaulted and discriminated all the time. You
Absolutely.
just
And going back to your analogy about the party, I want to be on the plan for that analogy. I want to be on the planning party planning committee and actually have my voice and my thoughts heard and implemented. So that's part of the equality part of, don't just invite me to a party, ask me to be part of the planning party committee. And I everything you said is so on point. We need to have show up and actually have people listen in and outside of the boardroom. Um, so, to that point, why is it so important now, especially in this new era with COVID-19, when things have been so disruptive and we're now seeing some of the deficiencies in organizations and models are being restructured, uh, that leaders ensure that they have a healthy organizational culture and that they're being engaging with their employees. Why should leaders have a healthy organizational culture? Oh, Andrew, oh, we'll be right back in a moment. Stay tuned.